welcome back to the next episode of the Sensible Mama podcast. Today, I am joined by Natalie. She has a very exciting and unique birth story to share with us, and I'm very excited to hear it. So, Natalie, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can just dive right in.
Yeah, my name's Natalie Ryczek. I am an attorney, and I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I'm 37 now, so I had my first at, I want to say I was 33, just on the cusp of 34. So I had waited to have kids until I was, a little bit older and had, gotten into my career and finished law school and all of these things. So yeah, that's sort of when I started my journey of being a parent, even though I knew I wanted to be a parent I always knew I wanted to be a mom, right? So I just really was about the timing.
Yeah, I understand. I had my first on my 30th birthday. So I was also, when I was younger, I thought I'm going to have kids when I'm like 22. I'll be having babies, and then career, life, whatever shenanigans happen. And there you are. And you know what? I don't know. This is kind of not really the point of today's podcast, but while we're at it, I think that I'm a better mom for having my kids in my 30s. Not to throw shade at anybody who's having kids younger or older, like whatever. It's everybody's situation is what it is, and it's great. But man, I did not have my stuff together when I was in my 20s.
Same. No, I mean, I think for me, I was very focused on, I really wanted to go to school, and obviously when you're going to be a lawyer, there's a lot of schooling involved in that. And so I was really focused on that and not really focused on, I want to get married or I want to do these things. And I knew it was sort of like a future for me.
Yeah.
Right? But it didn't really start clicking until when I hit 30 and I went, oh, wait a second, I better catch up on that part too, because, now the schooling stuff is done, but there is this biological clock, and it just starts ticking, and, you start thinking also too, you're like, I'm getting a little tired now. Am I gonna be able to handle those 5 kids that I had in my head? So, but it all worked out. And, I think my only regret to having them later is now that I have them, I wish I had more time with them, and I always think, oh man, I one day I'm going to be older and you're going to be, just 20 or 25. And I want to be around as long as I can for them. So
For sure. Yeah. I try not to go down that line of thinking. Yeah. I mean, some people have kids, I've totally off on a tangent now, but there's a musician that I follow who he is 50, and he and his wife or girlfriend just had kids. And I'm like, hey man, I don't know.
Well, my husband was 40 when we got married, and these are his first children. So, he's going to be 45 this year.
I used to have feelings about these things, and really?
No, the more the merrier. And whenever it happens, it's this blessing, and just enjoy the ride. And, we're talking about having a third, and, my husband was like, well, I am getting a little bit older. I'm like, yeah, but we're already 2 in and they're so small. What's another year at this point? Right? Let's just go for goal, because you've got, I think, you have this life and you have this opportunity to bring children in the world if you want them, and they bring so much joy into your life that I've seen people have children in their 50s, and there's no bad time to have a child, in my opinion.
That's exactly
5, but
but the body will stop it when it's about, you know what I mean? You are biologically constructed in such a way that if it's not going to work, it's not going to work,
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So on the birth part of how this happened.
Talk about that.
So I never envisioned that I would have any sort of home birth experience that was completely not my intention, not my vibe, not anything. I'm, cry at a paper cut kind of person, very much a pain wimp. And so when I got pregnant with my daughter, I just, in my mind, I thought, okay, good. I'm going to go to a hospital and I'm going to have a baby. And I had this one picture in my head, which probably everybody has, which is, the woman you see on TV or the movie laying on her back, screaming in agony and pain. And, I thought, surely that's going to be me. And I'm taking advantage of all the pain meds. I want the epidural. I want the whole 9 yards. And, can somebody else have this baby for me? Like it was, there was not a universe in which I was looking forward to this experience. And when people would tell me things like, oh, it's this beautiful, and that, I'd be like, yeah, that's really nice. Okay. So at the same time, I'd also heard from my mom, who had this horrible birth experience for me. And so she and probably all of my friends had heard about her experience, just like 36 hours of labor and nothing worked. She had wanted to have a natural birth. She was told she couldn't go to the birthing center because I was so late and overdue. And I was a big baby. And, she had everything. She had to have the episiotomy and the Pitocin and all the drugs, and nothing worked. And I just was not coming out. And, she's never let me live that down. And I guarantee some of my friends, if they watch this, they'll go, oh yeah, I've heard, her mom talk about that story. So I walked into this birth thing thinking, okay, probably that's going to be me,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm just going to, rather than be like my mom and even attempt to do something natural, I'm just going to like start at the hospital and,
Just own it.
Yeah. So my husband kept pushing me to at least consider having a home birth, which I thought was very interesting because he's a paramedic firefighter. And so he's, obviously been in a lot of hospital settings. He's had to go to people's homes when they have a home birth, right? And do some sort of, rescue service or whatnot.
Intervention of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, dude, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? But, he was like, no, he's like, oh no, it's really, you can totally do it. And I'm going, okay, you showing up to somebody's house who's like on their 5th baby and it just falls out is a little bit different than like me with my first. And he was like, yeah, no, it's fine. I've done it so many times. I was just like, okay, dude. So, but he did at least want me to look into it. And so I said, okay. And we watched this movie that's sort of a popular movie in this area. It was like The Business of Being Born.
Yes.
We watched it, and I watched it, and I was, I was definitely persuaded by the fact that, okay, I could totally connect the dots, that there was a money industry behind this, and that obviously our bodies are made to naturally do this. We've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, right? And so there was a lot of that, but I was still sort of like, that's great. I'm going to the hospital. Like, we have modern medicine for a reason. This is really nice and appealing, blah, 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 blah. So it didn't help too that everybody that was recommending me to have the home birth experience, I had some girlfriends here that were, I will just say, because they won't be offended, but like my most granola crunchy moms, right? And I love them, but every time they would recommend this, I could just envision them, with their very long hippie hair, like out in the river giving birth to their baby, like singing Kumbaya. And I was like, we are of a different species. So like, so the recommendation just didn't mean a lot to me, I was like, that's great. I think you were built to have these babies, But anyway, I ended up meeting this midwife who's very popular in this town. She's really just this amazing, amazing human being. And I went to one of my granola mamas, it was like a birthday party or something, and she happened to be there. And I didn't know who she was when I was talking to her. But at that point I was pregnant. I was visibly pregnant. And her and I just, started talking, and I realized that this midwife I'm talking to at this party had delivered probably like 20 women at this party. And she was surprisingly to me not what I had envisioned of sort of this hippie, midwife out in a cornfield. It was like, this lady was clearly a medical professional. She had, in my view, like just the right mix of, I know what your body can do naturally and what you are equipped to do and how to help you get there. But I also understand when it's time to intervene, right? To do something that, maybe is not the 100% natural, we're going to sit at home way. So I thought, okay, I'll take a meeting with her. So I took a meeting with her and I decided to hire her, and we went through, all the appointments, and I sort of was very, it was appealing because at the time she was coming to my house so I could do all of my, appointments at home instead of going to
Mhm.
the doctor and having to go into the hospital and see the OBGYN and all of that. And at the time there was, I think I told you this before, but they had the COVID shot had just come out and I was
Yeah.
pregnant, and it was not approved for pregnant women yet at the time. And for me, I really was very skeptical about taking it, even if it did get approved, because it was such a new thing. And I just didn't feel like there was enough information out there to make a decision that would potentially affect not just me, but this baby, right? So the OBGYN I had at the time was sort of, as soon as the shot became approved for pregnant women, he was pushing that.
Mhm.
Um, and by that time, I had actually already gotten COVID when I was pregnant. And
Same.
so, yeah, oh, well, that was really fun. So,
Super fun. At 7.5 months, I was like, this is my end.
oh my gosh, yeah, I was 5 months and I had it for 2 weeks. And it was, I mean, thank goodness my husband was with me, because he really just took care of me and made sure I got up and walked around and, just he was amazing through that. But at that point, I felt like, okay, good. Well, now I've gone through it. And obviously, I've built some immunity to this, right? And so, why would I turn around right after I had it and get the shot? That doesn't even, regardless of what you think about the shot, whether you want to do it or not, it's like, I already had the best immunity I could have. So, why would I take the risk of then getting the shot, So, I didn't really like that the OBGYN seemed to be kind of pushing that. And there was a couple other things. He was not keen on having, I really wanted to have at least the option of having a water tub in my birthing room. And, he really just wasn't keen on that. And there was just, there were things that I didn't like. And I remember at one point he said, well, we could maybe do that, but, it's my preference that you're on, that you're on a bed, and that's easier for me. And I remember thinking, bro,
Your
this is
preference.
about you. Like, yeah.
Right.
I was like, this is about me. And, even though I wasn't like super naturally inclined in terms of the birth, like I at least knew that I was going to be in pain and I wasn't going to give a hoot about what he was doing. I was going to
Yeah,
give
right.
my comfort.
Huh.
So the midwife just became more and more appealing. And so, I was like, okay, good. So we're going to do this home birth. But still in the back of my mind, I thought, all right, I'm going to do it because my husband wants me to do it and because I really like this midwife and I'm going to go through the motions. But like, probably what's going to happen is I'm going to give it my best effort. And 30 minutes in, I'm going to be like, okay, guys, got to quit. Let's go to the hospital. Right. So that was sort of my whole intention.
So in your world, was that plan A or plan B?
Which was home
To
birth plan
go to the
A?
hospital.
Oh, in my world, it was my secret plan A, right?
Okay.
It was kind of like, all right, I'm gonna tell everybody my plan A is this home birth, but I'm still scared about this, still very skeptical, but I'll at least get to show my husband I made my best effort, right?
Yeah.
So, but so as I got, just weeks go on, right? I passed my due date, and my little girl was just not, she's like, I'm cool in here. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, I'm not so cool anymore. Maybe you could come out. And there's a certain timeline that the midwife has to deliver you at home or they can't, right? If you go too far over, you have to go to the hospital. So we were nearing that timeline. So I said to my daughter, and at that point I'm trying to do all the things that, I walked like 4 miles a day. I'm like walking on the curbs up and down and doing all these, whatever funky thing. I was like, okay, maybe I'll put castor oil all over my belly. Like, I mean, whatever I could do to get this moving. And she was like, that's great. I don't care. So
You're comfy.
yeah. So I finally, on the day that I had her, earlier that day, I was talking to her and I said, look, it was like the last day that I could have her at home. And I said, if you don't come out tonight, unfortunately, what's going to happen is that you and I are going to go to the hospital and you're going to be forcibly evicted, right? And it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be fun for anybody. It's not going to be fun for mommy. It's not going to be fun for you. You know, let's just not go there. Let's like get this party started naturally, because, you know, as I got closer to the birth, then the reality of somebody like going to a hospital and somebody sticking me with a needle and all these things that I thought I would be totally okay with started to become less appealing in my mind now that I was actually there. And so I wanted to, at the very least, you know, even if I ended up going to the hospital, I didn't want to have to go check myself in a hospital and like get on Pitocin and do all these things to like jumpstart it. I wanted it to at least start naturally. Right.
Right.
So she, I guess, listened, and she was like, okay, mom, here we go. So I woke up about 2 a.m. I think it was maybe 2:15, 2:30, something like that. And my water broke, and it was like a monsoon, which nobody told me about either. I was like, I mean, literally, it was like somebody turned on a fire hydrant or something. It was like insane, or a fire hose. So I had, for some reason, decided to sleep on a Chuck's pad that night, and intuition, I guess. But so thankfully, like my bed was not destroyed. But of course, I woke my husband up, and I was, you know, it's like my water's broke. I also had the vision that like when your water broke, it was like, oh, this teensy, like, oh, you know, oh, there's a little.
Because in the movies, they're at the restaurant and she goes, oh,
yeah, like, exactly. So I was like very shocked when it was not that at all. So I was like, okay, great. So I went, I think my husband like held a towel or Chuck's pad or something underneath me as I was like walking to the shower. And immediately I went into very serious contractions, less than 5 minutes apart. Like there was no lead up. It was like 0 to 60. I was in labor.
And this is your first kid. That's
my
amazing.
First kid. And, you know, so in my universe, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm at a level 10 pain. I have no way to compare what this is supposed to be. Because I have no prior experience, the only thing I have as a reference point in my head is that probably this is going to be 36 hours like it was for my mom. And, you know, I'm already at level 10. I don't think I can do this. So I'm like telling my husband, I can't do this. Like, this is not, he's looking at me like, oh boy, if she's already saying this and we're only like 20 minutes in, you know? So we call the midwife. The midwife's like, you know, look, call me back when her contractions are closer. And we're like, no, they already are under 5 minutes or whatever, right? I think they were about every 2-3 minutes at that point, and we're, you know, just starting out. So thankfully she came down, and I labored a little bit. I tried to labor a little bit on my bed. I think I was like 4 centimeters or something, and they don't want to let you in the pool till maybe it was 5 or 6 centimeters or something, because you can kind of slow down the contraction. So I labored a little bit in the bed. I tried to labor a little bit like on the side of the bed. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is impossible. This is impossible. Like, being on your back in that position was intuitively, it was stupid, right? Because when you think about it, it's like, I had all this weight sitting on me, and you don't sleep that way when you're pregnant, right? Nobody at 9 months sleeps on their back. You know,
you're not allowed to, even if you wanted and could.
Yeah, and you can't anyway. So here you are, you have this massive amount of weight, and then, you know, it's like your body is trying to get something out. You're working against gravity. Like,
literally, like if you're on your back, the baby has to go up.
Yeah, like how is that going to happen? So, and then on top of that, because you have so much weight and pressure, it's like, it's very hard to move. It's hard. I mean, it was just, that was unbearable. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to get on my knees, right? And I was sort of on my knees on the side of the bed, but because the weight alone of being pregnant, like the pressure on my knees, it was just, this is also painful. So at that point, you know, we're maybe an hour and a half into this, and I am like, you guys have got to get this pool blown up. Like, this is happening I need to get in this tub. And now I'm getting pissed off, right? Because I'm getting a little bit of, I had this instinct that this baby was coming. And at the same time, I was doubting myself because I'm going, it can't possibly be this fast.
Well, it doesn't fit the like typical
at all
pattern or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like I have 10 hours to go and I don't know if I'm going to make it. and my husband, and I think probably even the midwife at that point, was thinking, yeah, lady, you got, you better settle in here and calm down because we got a while. And so I think I must have advanced like another centimeter or something. And the midwife said, okay, we're going to get the pool set up. So we got the pool set up and I got in that pool, and the pool was a game changer. Like, in my opinion, the best thing that this country should do and could do for its mommies having birth is to give everybody access to a pool. I don't know why that's not a standard in the hospital, because being in the water completely changed the entire scene in terms of my comfort, because now all of a sudden you're weightless. So, when you're having this contraction, it's obviously very painful. But in the moment that you're not having the contraction, when I was out on the bed or on the floor, wherever, you have, the contraction has stopped, but you have all of this pressure, right? You're still extremely uncomfortable because your body's not relaxed. You're still holding on to all this weight and everything, whatever. So when you're in the tub, you get this moment of reprieve when that contraction is over and you're just floating there and you don't feel any pressure on your back or your joints or your hips or any of that. It's just it was that alone. I felt like it allowed me to kind of gain my energy back for the next contraction. And then also too, it was just easier. Like, I could flip my body, I could turn around. I ended up having her, on my knees, and my husband was in the tub with me. And so I was able to hold on to him, and I had her on my knees in the most natural sort of position I could have her in terms of, gravity's help. And I was in the pool, so there was no pain on my knees or anywhere. It was just, being in the tub meant I could work myself through the pain easier. And I could go through a contraction, and that would not be great, but it was a lot better than what it was outside of the pool. Yeah. And the other thing too is I just think being in the water, your body is actually opening, and when you're out in the air, it's less comfortable than when you are in the water. And all of these parts that are moving, it just seems to move better, feels better. It's, I don't know how else to explain that, right? Without getting into
could not agree.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely, you're absolutely right. Your birth story is a very funny mesh of my two birth stories. I didn't ever get in the pool with my first, but it started on fast, whatever. I won't get into my story because, we're listening to yours. But I will say about the pool, my first labor was 23 hours long. Oh. Toward the end, I was like, this is a lot, I was tired. Because 23 hours of marathon running is a lot of hours. And I remember I was in the pool, and I would take these little micro naps. Like, I would be sitting like against the back, my husband would bring my little sippy cup with the straw, and I'd drink my Labораtor or whatever. And I would like conk out.
Yeah.
Only for like 30 seconds. They were little micro naps. To me, they felt like an hour. I would like come back, and I'm like, here comes another contraction, but I was ready for it. Like you said, like you have time to sort of actually relax, because you're right. If you're standing, you can relax for sure, but not fully, because you're still fighting gravity. That's a very, very good point.
Mm-hmm. That was amazing to me. I never had thought that was going to be a thing. I guess I just never thought about it. And then when I got in the pool, the change was just, just instant. And I think we all probably could understand when you get in a pool, how it feels, right? But when you get in a pool pregnant, it's like, oh my goodness, you're just weightless, and all of that pressure is relieved.
But on that point, I remember when I was like, I must have been just a few months pregnant. So at the end of the summer, I would have been like 6 or 7 months pregnant. I remember going into my parents' pool just for a swim because, somebody told me that swimming is the best form of exercise when you're pregnant. I remember swimming and I was like, I can move my body. And like, it was so refreshing. Like, I love swimming anyway. Like it's just fun. But like as a form of exercise, I would just do laps in the pool. And being pregnant, walking is an amazing form of exercise and you should, like if you can do light stretches, there's a lot of internet, people who teach pregnancy exercises. Those are great. If you can get into a pool and just swim a couple times a week, I didn't, but like, if you could, I bet you would be in such good shape and your body would feel so amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really shocked by that experience. And I guess I'm not a big, I don't think I really went into a pool much when I was pregnant, only because the house we were living in at the time, we didn't have one. We have one now. So I will probably, if I get pregnant again, be using it. But we didn't have one then. And I remember I'm more of like a hot tub person, and you can't really go in the hot tub when you're pregnant. And so I think one time I tried and my husband was like, no, you can't go in there. And I was like, okay, geez, bud, can I like put my feet in here? So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, I truly believe that every hospital should have that option because, you're in labor for a long time and it's painful, and getting that rest and reprieve and being able to move around, that felt like freedom in that moment. And it really felt like I could decide, okay, good, I am now going to turn over because this position is no longer comfortable, or I'm going to move here, I'm going to do this. And instead of being sort of strapped to a bed where it's like, I just felt helpless in that situation. And I did not like that. I didn't, in general, I think like every one of us probably been to a gynecologist, right? And you're just sort of sitting there. And it's like,
raise your hand if you like going to the gynecologist.
Yeah. And like, okay, and I remember like laboring on the bed, and it's like, it's my husband and the midwife. And it's like, you just feel so, as much as I love these people, I didn't like that. I'm very private in general. So the idea of people being up in my business, I don't like, and then just sort of feeling kind of powerless and like I'm in pain and there's nothing you can really do about it.
Right.
And there's nothing I can do about it because I can't even move my body. There's no, anyway. So,
and there's also a thing to say about like you said, like when you feel you need to move, I think that's a very important point, that your body actually communicates to you while you're in labor. If you take a moment and actually pay attention to what your body is saying, it'll let you know what's needed. Like sometimes you're standing and that's exactly what you need. Other times it's like, now I need to squat, and you don't know why, but you suddenly lower yourself into a squat, or you have to turn, or you have to put a leg up or move your hips a certain way. Now inside there's all these mechanics of, pelvis and things going this way and going this way, and like things are opening and babies are moving and turning. Like there's a lot of stuff happening, and your body will actually tell you what it needs for optimal delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's possible to do those things at least easier when you're in the pool,
Right.
And so I got in, and I don't think I was in the pool more than an hour, and the baby was delivered. And it was like, I remember that my midwife checked me and she goes, "Oh, you are having this baby right now." I was like, I know. So the birth from beginning to end was not quite 3 hours. So it was amazing. I mean, it was just wild. And I remember, on top of being in the water, the really cool part was all of a sudden I was in my home. I could, sort of set, I didn't have a bunch of lights on. I didn't have a bunch of whatever. Frankly, I didn't have time to do, some women I know like to do music or soothing. I didn't have time to do any of that. There was none of that. It was just like, blow up this pool as fast as you can in the living room and let's get in. And then the baby was coming. And the other thing I thought was really helpful being in the pool is, you hear a lot about the ring of fire when your baby's actually coming out, right? And it's very painful. And I will say, when I was in the pool, I had heard so much about that term. I mean, the name is sort of
terrifying,
right? Yeah. So it's like, I had an idea that was going to be painful, but and it was painful, but I fully believe it was less painful because I was in the pool and the water helped with that, right? As opposed to being exposed to the air. So, and it was kind of short lived. And then, the baby's out. So as soon as I had her, I remember I sort of leaned back in the pool and I put the baby on me, and it was just amazing. I remember I saw her in the water and her eyes were open and she had these like blue sapphire. If you've ever watched Game of Thrones and you see like the little White Walkers, because she had all the stuff on her, I forget what it's called, but she looked like a little baby White Walker, just like eyes open. She came up and I held her. And then I just remember thinking to myself, like, that wasn't so bad. I could do that again. And then I thought, did I just think that? Like, I had fully gone into this thinking this was going to be the worst experience ever. I'm not looking forward to this at all. I'm going to try to run to the hospital in the middle of my labor. And it just happened so fast. And it was so, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was easier because of the pool. It was, so much faster than I expected. And then all of a sudden I had this baby. And then at that moment, I really appreciated being in my house, because I thought if I had gone to the hospital, I'd be hooked up to a bunch of wires right now. I would have been on my back in a bed the entire time, because who knows if they would have ever really let me have the pool or any of that, because that was like a debate with my OBGYN. And then I would have been sitting there and somebody would have taken my baby and gone and done all these things and whatnot. And I would be, waiting 12, 15 hours to be checked out of the hospital. And all of that just was like not an issue, because now I was in my home and I could just, I think my husband made us breakfast by like 7 a.m. And my midwife had some breakfast and I had some breakfast. And then me, my husband, and the baby all crawled into bed, and she latched on, and that was it. And it was like, this was the best experience ever that I could have possibly had for a first time delivery. Like, it was shocking. So then after that, I was like on the bandwagon, like, oh, this is the best stuff. Everybody's got, you could totally do it, girlfriend. Everybody can do it.
Oh.
So anyway, so I'm actually so thankful that my husband, wanted me to do this, that he was encouraging of it. And it was, I will say, to be fair, I knew I had a paramedic as a husband, right?
That is cool. Yeah.
It was cool. I was like, okay, if the worst thing happens, like, I know not only does my midwife know the signs, right? Like, I obviously trusted her, but I also, you have a unique relationship with your spouse, right? And I really trusted that he would know, being in emergency situations every time he goes to work, what to look out for. So, I certainly think that influenced my willingness to go into this, at home, because I thought there's no way between the two of them that something bad is going to happen without somebody going, okay, it's time to go. Right. So, so that was really, it was just couldn't have worked out perfectly, more perfect.
That's amazing.
Yes. But then I had my second, which was a completely different experience. And so after the first, I was super like, good, I'm going to have all my babies at home. I'm so on this bandwagon. I think this is the most beautiful, natural, amazing. I really understood the hype of fear that people have around birth, because I had it. And the lack of awareness of the fact that you actually can do it at home. So all of a sudden it just became very real to me that, wow, I have been sort of sent all this messaging my entire life that this has to be in the hospital, that it's going to be this horrific, awful experience, that, you're going to need all these drugs and all this stuff. Like, I really had that view, and having then gone into it and having such a great experience, all the things that I had heard about how, no, your body really is capable of doing this. I guess I now actually believed it. Right. And to me, it seems kind of silly because I'm like, why, of course, why didn't I believe that before? Like, we've been doing this forever. But, when you're not seeing that ever portrayed, and people sometimes look at you, like, still to this day, I'll be like, oh, yeah, I had my first baby at home. And people look at me like I'm crazy. They're like,
you get that you're so brave.
Yeah. I'm like, no, you don't realize I wasn't brave. It just happened. I was not brave at all. But I had no choice. So, but anyway, so I was like, I'm definitely doing this with the second one. So I gave myself, when my daughter was about a year old, maybe a year and a few months, I got pregnant with my son. And so I thought, good, I'm going to do this the same way, So why not? If everybody says the second is easier than the first, and if my first was 3 hours, well, then my second's going to be, an hour. This is going to be great. So
you can do anything for 1 hour, right? Like,
I was like, I can do anything. This is going to be fine. So I hired the same midwife, and everything was sort of going along. But I started noticing in my pregnancy that I had a lot more. So with my first pregnancy, I really didn't have any morning sickness. I didn't have any bizarre cravings. I didn't gain a lot of weight. I mean, I maybe gained 28, 30 pounds through my pregnancy, and I'm not very tall. I'm like 5'1". So, it was easy. In my seven months with my first, I was hiking Mount Rainier, literally. And I walked every day of that pregnancy to the day she was born. I was walking 4 miles. And, with my son, I noticed right off the bat, I had really horrible morning sickness. For the first 3 months, I couldn't eat if I even smelled meat of any kind. I was like, I can't. And I love protein. I'm a big protein eater. But I was told my husband, like, you can't even have chicken in the house. Don't have chicken, don't have meat, nothing. I cannot smell that. I mean, I just want to vomit. So the first 3-4 months I had, nothing but starchy foods, potatoes, bread that was saltines is like all I could keep down. I gained significantly more weight in that pregnancy, probably like 70 pounds. I craved sugar all the time, and I don't drink sugar. I don't ever have soda. And all I wanted was soda.
wow.
And I was like, what is even going on right now? Like, I remember I had the quintessential pregnancy moment when I went to the gas station and I came out with like 4 different candy bars. And I remember like holding the candy bars in the car, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what happens in the movies. What is wrong with me? And I don't know. I just craved so much sugar. I mean, one time from Uber Eats, I like ordered 4 different like little cans of ice cream. I was just like, I went Googling, where can I order just this one piece of chocolate cake, and this was very bizarre for me because we have, a virtually no sugar policy in our house. My husband and I just don't eat that way. We're very, organic, all that stuff. So it's like, but I felt like I was being possessed, and people are like, oh, well, you can control that. I'm like, have you really been pregnant? Because when you're pregnant, your body says you need something, and there's no like, oh, I can just forego that. It's like a demand.
I've never done drugs, but I imagine this is what people feel like. Like, I remember one time my husband was on his way home from work and I called him and I was like, Nick, I need all of the world's potatoes in the house now. I need them mashed with butter and all of the salt, and I need it in the next like 10 minutes, please. I know you're 40 minutes away, but I need it like right now. He's like, damn, okay.
Yeah, well, and when your body tells you those things, it's for a reason, I mean, potatoes are actually a very, very good source of potassium and these various things you need. So I craved a lot of potatoes in my first trimester with my son. It was with my daughter too, actually, a little bit, but with my son, it was crazy because I was at 6 months pregnant. I looked full term, like I was going to have twins. I mean, and I could just tell that he was bigger, and I started getting worried, like, can I deliver a big baby, right? And my midwife was like, look, the weight of your baby is not really what is of concern, you know, because you can have a very big baby. It's really more about the measurements of, you know, somebody's, you know, their chest, their head, you know, can that come through, right? Well, I think she was trying to like not scare me because I was huge. I was so much bigger with this child by the time, I mean, my full term maternity clothes were like hanging up half on my belly, right? I couldn't pull them down. I looked like there's a GIF somewhere. I don't know if they're called GIFs or GIFs or whatever, you know, those little things on the internet you can post. Anyway, so there's one of like these Barbie legs with like an orca whale posted on it. Like that was me pregnant. I'm just like, yeah. I mean, that was like, it was crazy. And I had horrible sciatica. I couldn't walk at all. Like with my first, I mean, I would try to walk and I would just have the most awful sciatica down both of my legs. So I wasn't walking in as active as I was. And I just had these insane sugar cravings. And I was like, okay, I'm huge, you know, and I'm 5'1", and now I'm, you know, I think by the time I was getting ready to have him, I was like 70 pounds heavier, which is just a lot of weight for me. And so as we were nearing the end, I was getting these, you know, growth scans, and I mean, he was growing, and I could see that the technicians were like not telling me what was up. So, you know, like I could just see on their face, like, oh, it's a big baby. Yeah. I was like, all right. So
can I just, before you go on, how big was your daughter when she was born?
7 pounds, 8 ounces.
Okay. Very like, that's like a very average size. Yes. Okay.
Super normal. And she's very, very petite to this day. She was always on the small end. She's, you know, little tiny thing. My son was the opposite. So somewhere in my pregnancy, I learned from the other women in my husband's side of the family, who are all very small women as well, that all of their sons were 10 plus pounds when they were born. Just every one of them was just a huge, huge, giant baby. And
like, now you tell me.
Yeah. I was getting like really resentful of like all the men in his family. Like my father-in-law is, you know, like 6'2", and he's also a firefighter. He's just a bigger guy. And every time I would look at him, I would be so mad. I'd be like, because my husband, he's 6 foot, but he's a little bit deceiving because he's a twin, and him and his brother were both born like 7 weeks premature. And even as a premature baby, my husband was 7 pounds.
Jeez.
Yeah, he's a full-on baby. So I'm like, I always tell his mom, because his mom is like, you know, 5'3" and 100 pounds. And like every time I talk to her, I'm like, she's like, I don't know. I don't know how I did it. You know, she had to have a C-section with them. And I always tell her, I'm like, can you imagine if you would have had them full term? Like, you did have like 15 pounds in there or something. Like
that'd be like 20 pounds of baby in you, not to mention placentas and amniotic fluid and all the rest of the stuff that goes with it.
He said that when she came out of the hospital, she was 50 pounds lighter.
Whoa.
50 pounds just from all the fluid and everything. So, but when you see my husband, it's like, it's not like he's not like some huge guy, but he's certainly not a small guy. But it's like deceiving because I'm like, you were a twin, so you had to share half that with your brother. You know, and I feel like if that wasn't true, you'd have been like a 15-pound baby.
This is false advertising.
Yeah, it is false advertising. I'm like, let me look at your dad. Where's the rest of the lineage here, right? So, so anyway, I started getting really worried towards the end because I was so huge, and I said, look, I need to go get another ultrasound. So my midwife sent me for 2 ultrasounds, you know, I think they were like a week apart, and they showed, you know, huge growth. And she said, look, I'm going to send you for 1 more at this specialist who does like this 3D ultrasound. It was a whole thing. And so I walk into this woman's office, and mind you, like I can't pull my shirt all the way over my belly. Okay. And this lady looking at me, and I'm laughing because I can see what she's thinking. You know, she's like, yeah, okay, lady, come on. So she gets me on the bed, and she's doing the ultrasound, and she looks at me and she goes, so how are you planning on having this baby? And I was like, oh, I'm going to have, the baby at home. And she goes, okay, so you're not going to have this baby at home. And you're probably going to need to go to the hospital. And I mean, I'm going to give this all to your midwife, but I just want to talk to you about these measurements. And I said, okay. And she goes, okay, so you see, this is your baby's head, and this is the chest. And I said, yeah. And she said, it's measuring OOR. And I said, what does that mean? And she said, it means out of range for my machine. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah. She's like, this baby is looking like
a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing that I did not know about at all. I know. She was like, so I'm not sure that your midwife can deliver this baby at home, nor that you would want to, because the chances of it getting stuck is huge, right? So yeah, she was like, this little green dot that like measures it, like it's not big enough to go around your baby's head. And I was like, okay. So I sent all the data to my midwife. And my midwife and I had a conversation, and she said, look, the chances of this baby getting stuck are really high. It's not about the weight. Like at that point, I think he was predicted to be like 12 pounds. But
yeah, but my midwife has given, had mamas deliver 11-pound babies without a single tear with no problem. Like you're absolutely spot on. The weight. People are like, oh, you had a 6-pound baby. It must have been so easy to people. And no, you can still tear and have problems with 6-pound, and you can have an easy peasy 12-pound home birth. Like that is not the factor. It sounds like it should be. I understand why people think that,
Yeah, but it's not. And so she talked me through that and was like, look, it's not, because prior to getting these scans, I was like, the baby's going to be, 12 pounds. And she would tell me exactly what you just said. It's really not about the weight of the baby. But then when she saw the scan, she went, okay, now we're in a whole different territory. And I want to tell you why, because at this point with this, I can't allow you to deliver in the pool anymore. Right. So you will not be in a pool because the whatever rules and things she has to follow. Right. So, so even if I could labor in the pool at all, I can't deliver in it. She said at the point of delivery, you'd actually have to get out of the pool. And I was like,
that sounds awful.
Well, then we've just negated the whole point of doing a home birth. Like I can't be in the pool. And she said, nope, you can't be in the pool. Not only can you not be in the pool, if you start delivering and this baby gets stuck, we now have a matter of minutes to handle that situation. And you might be in an emergency where we are, calling an ambulance, and now you're in the middle of a very, very tough situation, right? That may not end well. And so she said, I said, she said, look, I've done this before. And she showed me videos, and I was like, I don't want to see these videos. Like, I know some moms are really into I'm like, please don't show me. I don't like watching that. It's just nothing I don't know how you do your job. It's amazing. Full props. Don't want to see it. So, but she's like, look, I can do it. I'm like, no, I get it. So I made a decision, and she was full on in support of it, that I would go to the hospital. So I went to a hospital nearby that had a whole midwife center connected to it, just because I felt like they would be more accustomed to someone having a midwife, and that I had not been checked in. I didn't have an OBGYN. I wasn't like part of the system. So, and they would let her in the room. And so she said, look, I'll be there. And so I checked into the hospital. They did a scan. They said, yeah, we're going to recommend that you get a C-section first thing in the morning. And I was 2 weeks ahead of time at that point. He was already scanning at like 12 pounds. They're like, and those last few weeks, they just keep growing. They're like, the situation's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. So they, they took him out the next morning, and now I'm having the extreme opposite experience, right? And my midwife and my husband were both in the room, and that was I would say that was extremely comforting, because again, now I have two medical professionals with me, and my midwife, I had been with her the whole time. And I remember, there's certain things that you don't realize. Like, so at that point, I have to have a spinal tap. So, I go in, I was nervous about it, but frankly, I didn't have a choice. So it was kind of like, guess we're doing this,
Yeah.
So I remember, you're sitting there. The biggest thing that I can recall is that there was so much pressure, you know, I couldn't feel them opening up my body, but I could feel, first I felt a relief of pressure because apparently when they opened me up, I had so much fluid that it like shot out and like hit some nurse. So poor thing. So it's like, there was sort of a release of some pressure, but then they also have to get in there and like take the baby out, right? And so there was pressure. I felt them sort of pushing and tugging and whatever. But then the baby was out. And what I didn't enjoy about that experience is that, you know, you're sitting again on your back. That's uncomfortable. You're just in a position that's an odd one for all the fluid that you have. And I remember I didn't like how that felt on my head or my chest. And what I didn't know is that you can go into shock. So I started throwing up when I'm on the table. And my midwife was prepared for that. So, but I was scared. I was kind of like, what's happening? Like, why am I throwing up? Because I didn't eat anything, right? So now I'm just like throwing up bile and I'm like sort of head turned still on the operating table. And my midwife, thankfully, like at this point, the baby is out. My husband is now with the baby. They're doing whatever they do, right? And I'm sitting there still throwing up and my midwife was with me. And thankfully she was there because she saw that it was happening and I was able, you have a lot of doctors and people around you and I couldn't really talk to them, they're doing whatever they're doing. And so I was able to kind of tell her and she very quickly told me, look, this is normal. This is actually like, this can happen. It's a reaction to the drug and to your spinal tap, I guess it can occur. And so that was like just comforting, just knowing that like, okay, I'm not about to die. Like this is a normal body reaction. And so she helped me. And I was also able to ask her like when they were doing the procedure, because you have this whole, cloth in front of you can't see what's going on. So I would ask her like, do you see what they're doing? Does it look like they're doing it right? Is it okay? Like everything looks good. And she'd be like, yeah, they're doing a great job. Everything's great. And I was really thankful that I went to a place that did have a midwife center, because when I first walked in, I was able to meet the doctor. She came and talked to me and I was able to tell her like, look, I was planning on having this home birth and I don't want people talking and I don't want music and I don't want any of these things. I want it to be as peaceful as possible. And she was super okay with it. I remember she sat and she instructed her entire staff in front of me, hey guys, we're going to keep only the lights on that we need. We're going to, no talking unless you have to talk, no music, no nothing. And they really adhered to that. I mean, there was obviously times when they had to talk to each other, but they tried to respect that wish as much as they could. And it was a female doctor who was doing the C-section. And I just remember feeling like that it wasn't her first rodeo hearing that, which was sort of nice to know. And she really respected it. And so as far as a C-section could go, I felt like it went very well. And it was fairly fast. It's not like a long procedure. And then it was like, okay, now you're going to get wheeled out of here. And at least my husband had the baby. So I remember telling him like, you don't leave that baby, like stay with the baby. So, and then we were all back in one room together and, it was different because at that point now I had him and he was big. He was not 12 pounds, but he was close to 10 pounds.
Wow.
And it was different because when he came out, he was crying. He was pissed off, right? He was like, unlike my daughter, who was just like this peaceful, like, I'm going to come out and I'm going to lay on you, mom. And she didn't even cry. She was just so like, thanks, He was like, what is happening? And why are you taking me out of here? And I have a picture. Someone took a picture of him and they're like holding him up and he is angry. He is like, I am like not cool with this. And the thing though, so now I've had the C-section. I'm in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 3 days because I I don't even know why it was so long. Frankly, I don't even remember. It was such a cloud, but I just remember I was on a lot of pain medication because, you have this huge tear.
Mm.
And it was it was just painful. I also had, because of the weight of my son and all the pressure, I had some just feelings of pain and pressure down in my pelvis area that were not comfortable.
Yeah.
So there was like 3 days of being in the hospital, being hooked up to machines. My son, when you're in the hospital, there's a different nurse for everything, and they're always coming in. And at one point, I was like, you guys have to stop coming in my room. Like, I mean, literally through the night, as I'm trying to recover, there's a nurse every hour walking in. And at some point, I actually started to, like, it takes a lot for me to get real pissed off. But like, at some point, I was like, they're like, is there anything else we can do? And I was like, yeah, stop coming here. Like, stop coming in the room. I don't need one nurse to turn the light on and one nurse to bring the milk for my son, because he was so big. They wanted to do all these checks for his, to make sure he didn't have sugar issues.
Mm.
They were pricking his foot and doing stuff. And then they gave me donor milk and all this stuff, but there was just somebody always there between him and me. And finally I was just like, you guys have to stop. Like, you need to give me 4 or 5 hours of completely uninterrupted time where nobody's coming in this room. I can't do it anymore. And they did respect that, at least, but we were there for several days. And so at that point I was like, well, I realized I needed to have the C-section. I think I made the right decision doing that. But being in the hospital and tied to all of these things, because I've got an IV and I've got the pain medicine and doing like that, was just a very different experience. It was more chemical, I would say. It wasn't this enjoyable thing. I didn't like, you just have all these people coming and looking at you, and okay, now we're gonna like take your underwear off and we're gonna look at you all over again. And it's just like, it's very invasive, and I understand why, but it's not fun. And then because you're on all these different medications, then you can't go to the bathroom. You can't have a bowel movement. So now you're doing other things to make sure that you have a bowel movement. And it's like, it's just a lot of not fun, a lot of interventions, and even when you come down from the having the spinal tap, they don't tell you that there's like, your body will actually go into a withdrawal, like right afterwards. So you have this baby and you're sitting there and you just had surgery. And I remember I was like, I think I started shaking or something. And I was like very confused as to why I was shaking. And my midwife was like, no, this is normal. You're going to feel this while this stuff is exiting your body. So it was just like a lot of, that was very different. Now I came home, I had a scar. I couldn't get up and down the same way. Right. So like if you're comparing the two, what's easier to recover from? Certainly my first birth was way easier to recover from. Having the C-section, not that it's not doable if you have to do it. It's not that I want to scare people, but it's different because you've now torn open this whole wall of muscles here, and it takes a long time. I mean, you're doing things like everything that you do, you don't realize engages this core. So you're sitting, you move like this, you're engaging that core. You move your leg up, you try to get into bed, get out of bed, get up on a chair, get out of a chair, like you go to the bathroom. Every single movement that you have is actually engaging this core. And so you are feeling that pain, and it's very hard. And then like, just even think about when you're holding your baby and you need to make an adjustment. You've now engaged it again. So
wow.
That part sucked. I'm gonna be honest.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking like, okay, going up and down stairs. Having never had a C-section, I can only, I'm talking to all these mamas now on the podcast, and I'm learning all this stuff, But like, last night I was breastfeeding my baby, and I got uncomfortable, so I just shifted my butt a little bit, and even that, like,
yeah, and also too, because you have the whole bandage on there, right?
Not to mention when you're nursing. I mean, to be fair, a newborn is different than my, whatever year and a quarter old giant of a baby, but like the pressure is also on there. Like I remember going for a walk a couple days after I had my first kid. I put him in the little baby Bjorn, the little carrier, And I was like, I'm going to go outside. It's cold, but it was like a sunny day. So I like bundled us all up because I had him in January. And I was like, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to be a good,
Oh, yeah, you're
good
not supposed to
mama.
like that soon.
I made it literally like 4 houses down my street. And I was like, my insides are jelly and I can't move. I'm going back home. I am miserable. I am not a good mama. I'm not going to recover like this. I'm going to go lie down in bed. My midwife was like, what were you doing?
Oh my gosh, that's really funny because after my first, about a week after, I was like, I'm going to go on a walk. And same experience. And my midwife said the same thing. What are you doing? Like, not for like 2 or 3 weeks, girl. Like,
Yeah.
glad you felt up to it, but no.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing with the C-section. You now have this whole open, well, I mean, it's not open because they've sewed it up, right? But like, it's still a wound, and it is healing, and it's beyond skin deep. It's through your muscles, so and through your uterus, and it's like, so it's like layers of pain and pulling, and I didn't really understand that there was going to be a lot of tugging like that, that there was going to be just that much. And then you have the bandage and you have to clean it all the time. And then, I had this big baby. So I had a lot of excess, skin and fat in this area. So then you have to make sure your bandage is right and then it doesn't get infected. And that just like, it took a good 6, 8, 10 weeks, probably somewhere in there to like really feel like, okay, it's healed. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and it's not bothering me every time I'm moving around. And so that recovering from that C-section really required a lot of my husband because I couldn't get up out of the bed. When I had my daughter, as soon as she was out, I was more mobile because now I'm not carrying this baby. With my son, I was still not mobile because I was, okay, now to get out of bed, I need you to come help me. I need you to help me sit down. I need you to help me get up. Like, that was going on for weeks and weeks.
Let alone doing all of those things, holding a baby and having a toddler.
Yeah. And that was like a whole thing. So do I think it was probably the right decision because I think it would have been a horrific birth otherwise, and maybe my son wouldn't have made it? Yeah. I mean, I think it was the right decision. But the recovery is vastly different. So now I have sort of the both extremes. Mm-hmm. And as we talk about, there's other things I worried about too. Like when you have a natural delivery, the bacteria from mom transfers to baby, and that's actually really good for their gut health and all that. Well, I didn't have that with my son, and so then I was like, oh my goodness, what if he doesn't get the same start? And like, all the things you think about. And he's very healthy, but, there's advantages. So I've now seen the extremes, and now we're going into conversations of the third. And I'd be honest, I don't know what I'm going to decide to do because I kind of feel like it's going to come down to gender. If I have a little girl and it's a 7-pounder, okay. If I have.
Here's the thing though, is I think that that's totally the right attitude. Is you have to live in the moment. Sounds so like whatever, but truly like look at it in present time, right? Like, what is happening now with this baby? And you can use the data that you have and the experience that you have and all that from the past to help you gauge what decision you're going to make. But you can't make a decision until you're in the moment of making a decision, right? Like,
exactly.
I think that's a very sane way to look at it.
Yeah. And I mean, if I go on, well, if I have a boy, likelihood it's going to be a giant, since all the boys in this family are giants, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I just, but then, I don't know. Then do you do a VBAC, right? Like my midwife's very specializes in that. So it's like, well, that's a possibility. But then, there's all these factors that come in that are my body. Can my body handle that, right? Because with my son, it took me a year to feel like my pelvis was actually back to normal because he was just so big. And, my sciatica took a long time to go away. Every once in a while still, as I move around, it's like I hear a clickety crack, something, something's going on. So it's like, it really, just his weight was really hard for my body. And so, even for decisions like, well, with my son and my daughter, we wanted to have them 2 years apart. And I always thought, okay, if we have a third, we'll do the same thing. This time around, I'm like, nope, I'm pushing that another year because I just feel like I got my body back to somewhat normal. And I told my husband, like, I can't even think about, I can't fathom doing that again yet. Right. So maybe we push that. So,
you know, but same thing as we're talking about in labor, you listen to your body. I think there's also something to that for is your body ready to have another kid? Like, I think that you are the only person that can answer that question, because you're the one that is able to listen to what your body is telling you. And if your body's telling you, I'm not there yet, girl, then
exactly. Okay, exactly. And, you know, so I think we'll probably shoot for, you know, maybe next year. And then, you know, and then in terms of how we deliver it, I mean, I guess we'll make that decision as it happens, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it'll be my hope is that it'll say, okay, so we know we said the second one was supposed to be better, but the third one's really going to be an hour. Like, just, you know, this baby's just going to fall out as you're walking down the street.
I love it. Like, love it.
So anyway, so yeah, I mean, I feel like for having had both experiences, if I had my preference, for sure, it would be having the home birth. You know, that experience was a beautiful, wonderful experience. And I'm not the mama that's like kumbaya, you know, all of that stuff. That's just not me. So for me to say it was really beautiful and amazing and wonderful, it's like, just, I think it's very, it just really was. And if I could do it again that way, I would. But now that I didn't get the opportunity to do it again that way, I also feel like I would be prepared if I had to go the other route, and, you know, at least know what that would look like, and not be terrified. Because of course, when someone's talking to you about having a C-section, you know, there are obviously fears and concerns with that too, you know.
Definitely.
I didn't really have a whole lot of time to look into it, which was probably good. But yeah, so I guess for moms that are, you know, if you're thinking about what you want to do, I mean, I would not be afraid of what your body is capable of doing. Of, you know, if you want to be in a hospital because you feel like that will give you kind of the best of both worlds, try to find a hospital that will give you a home birth, right? That has a midwife, or not a home birth, a water birth, right? Or that has a midwife center connected to it. Or there's all these options that you have, where you can, I feel like you can get the best of both worlds if you need to, you know what I mean? If you're not comfortable being totally at home, that's okay. That's understandable. I feel like I only did it that way because my husband's a paramedic. So I was like, what's the worst that could happen? It's like, you know, someone is the paramedic's already here if it goes
right.
bad, you know? So, but so if you're not totally comfortable doing that, well, then it's like, okay, go to like my aunt, you know, 20 years ago did a midwife center that was connected to a hospital, and that worked out really well for her. And I've had friends that have done the midwife center and then they had to get transferred to a hospital. So you don't really know, but I feel like giving your body the option of having the water at least, and allowing it to do its thing, is probably going to be better than you think it will be. And if it's not, then you have all the resources around you to do whatever you need to do as your next step. But I wouldn't let the fear and the medical, you know, worries and concerns, not that they're not real concerns, they are, but that messaging of it has to be this way, or you're, you know, you're going to die, or your baby's going to die, or whatever. I mean, they flood you with so much stuff, you know, that I think that there's just a lot of hype on that is not always true. You know, I think you can go look at a lot of other countries to this day. I think even in the UK right now, the standard is not having your baby in the hospital. The standard is having your baby with midwife. Like, that's how women do it more often than not in other countries in the world, including other first world countries. We kind of do it a little bit differently here. And, you know, is that the best way to do it overall? Do we need medical intervention when we need it? Absolutely. Yes. But can we have a system that leans more towards helping the woman get what she needs to actually deliver this? I think the answer is yes. Like, if I would have had to deliver my daughter on my bed the entire time, of course I would have been screaming for the drugs. I'd been like, you guys are crazy. This is awful. So it's like, we're already putting a woman in the wrong position in the first instance, when it's like we could be doing all these things in a hospital. You could have a pool in a hospital. There are hospitals that do this. You could deliver. You could do all these things in a hospital if you wanted to, if we had a system that sort of was inclined to think that way and work that way. And, you know, there's reasons that we don't. So I would just say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you just listen to your body and do, I don't know, that intuition is like, it's there for a reason. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Well, that was a ride.
Maybe on my third one, I'll just pop out a dragon or something. Like,
you know what? And when you do, we'll have you back on the podcast and you'll tell us all about it, because I mean, honestly, when you do have your third, I do want you back on, because, you know.
Yeah, who knows? What's going to be the new thing?
It's great.
Yeah.
We've gone well over an hour, but I am very glad we did, because that was amazing. I think there's a lot of really valuable advice and sort of viewpoints and things that you've shared. I think that the audience will get a very high value out of this.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful. And I hope, and I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, if I really want to do this way, you know, that's wrong. There's no wrong way to do this, right? There's just there's some techniques that work better than others. And then there's everybody's body, and everybody's got to feel comfortable with what's actually going on. And right. So I'd say just advocate for yourself, you know, make sure that you are. And if you feel like your doctor is not listening to you, well, then take note of that. You know, find somebody that's going to listen to you, that's going to help you, that you feel really comfortable with. That I'll say this before we end off. The first OBGYN I went to when I very first got pregnant with my daughter, he was just most horrible bedside manner ever. He just total jerk the entire time. Like I remember walking out going, there's no way I'm going to be with this dude. I can't. Some women loved this guy because they felt like he was the person that would save their baby and could do all this stuff. But I felt like, I can't even communicate with you. And if I can't communicate with you, then how are we going to go on this journey together? And you're going to, like, it just, I could foresee that we would be creating problems that could then run us into bigger problems just because we're not connected and we're not talking. And so I immediately dismissed that. And I think when you're the person that's sort of not in the know, you feel like, well, okay, I just got to listen to whatever this doctor tells me. But right. You need to listen to your intuition. You need to decide, okay, do I like this person? Do I have a good rapport with them? Do I feel like they're listening to me? Are they taking me seriously? Are they not taking me seriously? Because there are other people out there. There's not one doctor, there's many, and there's midwives, and there's, you know, you should talk to your friends. You should, you know, if you don't want to have a midwife, well, consider getting a doula. Like, just have somebody in your corner that you can actually talk to and that can help you through the journey, and, you know, that you feel good about.
I love that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Have you back on in the future for sure. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say to the fine people out there?
No, I just, I wish everybody luck with their journey. And I hope that, you know, whatever I've given of my information here and what my experiences is helpful. And yeah, I mean, it's like a journey for everybody. And there's a lot of data out there, and there's a lot of fear out there. So don't necessarily pay attention to facts and information, but don't worry about fear. I always just remind myself, like, people have been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. That's really true. So there is a lot of knowledge out there to be gained about those experiences, and just seek out as much of that information as you can so that you feel like you're walking into it as empowered as you can feel.
I love it. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody, and I'll see you in the next episode.